All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our SMS webinar, where we are going to talk through the new features of version 21.5. So today, what we're really going to be focusing on are two analysis functions that have been added to SMS Advanced, the Agronomic Analysis, as well as the new yield analysis tools. So we're going to have Aaron Friedline, who is our product specialist. He's going to go through and talk through those different features. He's also going to go through the equipment report that is available in both SMS Basic and Advanced. If you do have any questions as we are going through the presentation, go ahead and add those to chat. We ask that everyone stays muted and turn off your cameras as the presentation is going. Also, just as a note, this will be recorded and posted to YouTube. So if you want to review anything, those will be available later as well to the SMS YouTube channel. And with that, I am going to pass it off to Aaron, and he is going to get started and talk through these new features.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you for everyone else joining us today. I am going to turn off my camera to kind of help focus you on the things going on the screen, and we'll kind of get a little started here. So yes, we're going over some of the new features that were released in version 21.5 here last week. And we've been spending some time on a lot of these items to get them kind of in a presentable form. Some of these things have been in kind of the pipeline for more than a year or two. So so with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to start with the agronomic analysis first. Kind of the background of this tool is it provides you some of the feedback on the efficiency of a crop that was harvested and the inputs used to create it. When it's run, it will reference a single harvested crop. So for example, 2020 harvested crop, and any of the applied seed or nutrients for N, P, or K and seed that were used to grow it. In most cases, this is probably going to relate more strongly to corn crop production compared to other crops, but it can be used for anything. So if you have other crops or treatments out there, you can kind of use this to see how those compare. So we're going to get started. I'm going to kind of walk through kind of the steps of getting these outputs created, and then we're going to go through some of the sample layers that we've created. So when you get into the agronomic analysis, into the analysis wizard, you'll see at the top there's a new agronomic analysis option. And you can run that for a single field or for multiple fields. And then you're going to select what data you want it to run against. So in my example, I'm going to be showing some of my farm's data. And so we're going to look at 2020 harvest information and the corn crop. Okay. It is going to automatically reference the planting layer for that field within a time span. And so, so if you have the same crop planted back to back, that doesn't happen real often, but you would want to make sure that this layer, the time span is set correctly to grab that, to grab the correct planting information. Okay, and then we're going to look at the applied nitrogen, the applied fertility. And as I stated, this is going to more closely align with corn production, but N, P, and K values can be pulled from any data in your management tree. So if you have all your as applied data saved in the correct field in the correct year, it'll work to find that. It'll actually also go back and pull data from up to 400 days before harvest. So for example, if you have fall applied anhydrous on some fields, and then other fields you have spring applied anhydrous or in-season nitrogen application, it'll grab any of those items, and you can adjust that number of days before harvest as you need to. And if you don't have any as applied data, let's say you have someone else custom apply it, or you don't have a rate controller on that piece of machinery, instead of using the as applied, you can also use a prescription and just make a prescription for the amount of nitrogen or fertilizer that was applied to get that to work as well. You can also put in information that relates to data that wasn't logged. So for example, if I had a ground drive pump on the corn planter that applied fertilizer, I didn't meter it. I don't have an as applied layer for it, but I can put in, say, 35 pounds an acre was applied at planting. And then that would be added to the total that was found in the management tree for other as applied layers. You can also adjust the amount utilized. So if you feel like, for example, you spread some urea and it was dry immediately following that, you didn't get a rain to incorporate it, and you felt like there was some loss, you can say instead of 90%, instead of 100%, you can say that 95 or 90% of the total amount of nitrogen that was out there was actually utilized by the crop, and that'll adjust some of these values. All right, so we kind of try to make this kind of as seamless as possible. It goes back and tries to find the data for you instead of trying to pick the specific layers that were used throughout the year. Okay, and so what we get out of that is these layers. So we have a nitrogen efficiency, phosphorus efficiency, potassium efficiency, and then we have the actual raw amount of N, P, and K that was applied. We get a seed efficiency, and then the raw yield data that was found. And so you can kind of do the math backwards if you suspect something is off by using some of these other layers. Okay, so we've also used some custom legends, and you'll kind of see those showing up here. So the first one we're going to talk about here is seed efficiency. Now, in some circles, there's kind of this rough target of about 7 bushels per 1,000 seeds planted. So as an example, if I were a grower and I planted 30,000 seeds an acre, I would expect to see around 210 bushels an acre produced. And so this is a rough metric. It's not, exactly, a given number, but it's kind of one of those things as a target. It's very dependent upon weather, genetics, fertility, but it gives us a starting point. And so you can use this to help evaluate where your most efficient areas are and where you need to evaluate some other stand. As I mentioned, we have a custom legend that we've applied to try to draw your attention to those areas that are a bit more concerning than others. You'll notice in this field, I have some areas that are red. I had some early season emergence issues, and then I had some late season wind issues that took down some of the yield. And so therefore my seed efficiency was knocked back from what it could have been. And so, so anything lower than 5 will show up as red. Anything in black will show up with seed efficiencies above 7. And so, like I said, we're really just trying to focus on the areas that seem to always be in red. And so I've got a couple areas on our farm where we'll have some timber affecting the outside areas of the field. And we'll show those here in a bit. All right. So that's kind of where the seed efficiency is. Again, that's taking your planted data that you had used in that spring and compared it to that fall's harvest. All right. We're going to move on to nitrogen efficiency. And nitrogen efficiency is kind of this hard target, and if you knew what the weather was going to be like every growing season, you'd make your plan to maximize both your seeding efficiency and your nitrogen efficiency as best as possible. But since we don't have that crystal ball, we're trying to tell you and give you a better reflection of what happened. But nitrogen efficiency layers can provide feedback on where the fertilizer is best utilized and maybe show how efficient the methods of fertilizing application are and the efficiencies to be gained. Similar to the seeding efficiencies, we are showing the red for the least efficient area, and a darker green for the areas that are really putting out higher yield based on the amount of inputs that it took to create it. You can kind of see in our legend here, we're in pounds per bushel. So you can kind of think of the old adage of 1.2 pounds per bushel of yield goal. That's kind of the same number scale we're working on with this. And if you don't like the scale that we provided, you can change the values and overwrite our legend to something that suits you more in your general location. Other layers like phosphorus and potassium efficiency, we calculate this when they're found, but with the wide variance in how you would see that information or be applied from one year to the next, we don't have a custom legend because the values are just going to be so variable. So we provide that information, but we don't have any custom legends for that specific, those specific attributes. So, all right. So we're going to keep moving on here to yield analysis. The other analysis function we created this year was yield analysis. And with it being one of the main report cards at the end of each year, we tried looking at how we can evaluate several years and determine how things change over time and where we can learn more about our field and improve for future years. We compiled this into several different layers that we are providing to you and make those determinations. And we'll go through how to kind of the same way with the agronomic analysis. We'll go through and show you how to build the layer first, and then we'll go through some example maps. All right. So at the bottom of the list, in the analysis wizard, there is the yield analysis option. They're in alphabetical order, so we kind of bookended it almost this release with one at the beginning and one at the end. So, but we have yield analysis here at the bottom, and again, it can be run for a single or for multiple fields at a time. And kind of the same idea, you're going to select a field, and you're going to select a crop type that you want to evaluate. And if you select, for example, 2020 as your starter year, we'll work backwards from that here in the next slide. Okay, and so on this dialog, this is the only settings that there are. We kind of try to condense these things down as much as possible, as you can see. But we're starting with year 2020, and we're going to go back 8 calendar years, 8 years of yield data to analyze any year that was in corn and kind of compare them to the other years for that field. If possible, I think you want to use something more than 3 years or more. 1 year will definitely not provide a whole lot of information. 2 years, you get a little bit better, but it's still not as robust as you'll get with 3 or more. So we do have the ability to get planting information in here as well, and I'll kind of show you how that sets in here and where we kind of use that information. But that's really all there is. You can make adjustments for your analysis, like your interpolation settings. But we've got them set to use automatic. So if you have 2 different combines, maybe you have a 12-row head and an 8-row head in the same field, it'll adjust to use the proper settings for each combine in that field. So so those are kind of settings that we kind of put on rails for you, and kind of give you some of those feedback points. All right, and so that's really all there is to it. Once we have gotten the sample done, we'll show you a preview of the first field. So if you've done several fields, you're going to just see that kind of that first one as a sample, and then save that. We do recommend when you save this to the management tree, and this is true for both the agronomic analysis as well as the yield analysis. I encourage you to save it to the year that the harvest was done in, and to the crop type as a product name. So in this case, I've saved both my agronomic analysis and my yield analysis to 2020 as the year, and to the corn crop type, because that's what crop is planted in that field. And that just kind of helps. Some of those legends that we created will automatically populate that way. And so you'll want to take advantage of that. You can kind of see in the data set name as well that we have the grain type and the span of years that were included in the analysis function. And that just kind of helps kind of keep track of what you've done and kind of keep things organized. All right. So I'm going to get, let's see here. All right. So as you can kind of see here, we get several items for this layer. And you can kind of see this custom legend that we've gotten created as well. And again, all of these legends, we've got the colors kind of organized in a way that we thought was helpful. Obviously, you can change whatever you like. You can change the range of numbers as well. But we kind of tried giving you something to start out with that was further along in the process of being presentable and try to understand it for the user, for the reader. So so you can kind of see in this example all the different layers we're showing, and I'll kind of go through these in detail, but we're going to start here with max yield and kind of go from there, showing what that is, what that's going to do for us. Okay. All right. So maximum yield is showing you if you took all of those 8 years. So I had data back to 2013. If I took data, each of the best parts of this field. So in other words, in this spot in this field, if I looked at that exact spot and I said, what was the best yielding value for that spot over those 8 years? And it said it was 225 bushels an acre. It would take 225 and put that in a new map. And that's this map we're looking at. And so this is like the theoretical, if I took all my best years combined and I put them into one layer, this is that layer. Some people might use this as a yield goal, saying, well, it produced this much yield in 2017 or 2019. It should be able to do that again. And that's one way to look at it. Obviously in different areas of the field, you might have different soil types or different varieties that were better or worse given the weather conditions that year. So you can kind of buffer that idea just a little bit. But that's kind of one of those things that you could use. The other item that I thought of as well is that if I'm doing some grain marketing early on in the growing season, and I want to know, okay, I've got this new best hybrid that my seed dealer's given me. I'm going to put a little more nitrogen out this year. What is my best case yield ever been? And maybe use that to kind of temper your expectations, right? And so that's kind of another way you could look at it. But this field, you can kind of see I've got some timber ground all the way around the outside of the field. And so I've got kind of a wide range of data. We don't have a custom legend in this case because every field's very different. But we kind of give you an idea of the best case scenario. What is that best case possible in your area? Okay. Now, to go along with the highest yielding yield value, we also can pull, if you have that planting data, we can also pull the data for what was the highest yielding hybrid that was planted. And so in this example, you can kind of see this, the second variety here was the dominant one. You can kind of tell by the acres. And that year was a good year. It was 2018. It was just a good crop year for corn. So that might have had something to do with it. But that's just kind of a variety thing. So you can, if you know that one variety seems to do really well on a particular piece of ground, in future years, that might be something to kind of focus on. Does it have some of the same genetics? As seed varieties kind of change in and out, does this next variety have some of that same potential as one that's maybe got some common male or common female that was used in 2018? So that's one of the layers that we use to go along with the highest yielding hybrid that was used. We also have the highest yielding year. And so this is kind of helping you benchmark the year that was used that had the best yield, and you can kind of use this to help gauge the weather that was present that year. As I said, 2018 was a pretty good corn year for my region, my area of the Corn Belt, and so that kind of really shows here. But that just kind of gives you an idea of what year that was. You can kind of use that to say, okay, yeah, that was a pretty good year. I'm not going to expect that kind of weather every year to get up, through the growing season. So you can use that to kind of temper some of those expectations. All right. So as we said, weather, seed, and soil all play a huge role in all of those details. And so using some of those other tools like the highest yielding variety might help you, do some better hybrid selection down the road. Okay. All right. So if we had, I talked about all the good news first. I'm going to talk about the bad news next. The minimum yield. The minimum yield is kind of one of those things too that shows, the range of extremes. And so if I took all of the poorest yielding data for this particular field, I would see this as being my minimum production. Okay, so you can see my reds are a lot redder, a lot lower yielding. I only loaded in about 3 years or 4 years of yield data for this sample, this information. So I've got some pretty good years built into this. So my minimum yield isn't as minimum as it probably could have been if I'd used my whole library. But you kind of get the idea. This is showing you the minimum yield that you've recorded on this property. And it kind of gives you an idea to temper maybe some of the production issues, kind of on the worst case side. So let's say if I was in that same marketing position and I wanted to market grain early in the growing season, I can say, okay, well, my minimum yield might be 157 on this field based on this map. So, 100 bushels an acre, I'm probably safe in. You get halfway through the growing season and you feel like, the moisture is there to at least get you to that point. It kind of gives you just an extra check based on real data that you can use for your system. So that's minimum yield. The other thing that I have picked up on this is it really shows you in the minimum yield areas, the areas that are highest yielding in those areas. So, kind of through this is a ridge through the top of the field here. These areas that are very green still, there's not a lot of fluctuation in that layer. So even in bad years or poor years, I still seem to have a decent production. And that's what this next attribute is, which is yield spread. It simply is just the maximum yield for an area minus the minimum yield. And so this kind of gives you your spread. If you're within 15 bushels from top to bottom, in some of these areas over here, that's a pretty good number to be confident that area seems to do pretty well. And you'll notice some extremes here in the above 60s. And again, this legend is something we pre-defined for you. So if you feel like that's, not going to fit your system, you can change those numbers to whatever you like. In this area right through here, we added a grassed waterway over time. And so in 1 year or 2 years, it's got harvest data through it. And then in the other years, it has 0. So that's going to be a pretty big deviation from what it's normally had. So, but you can kind of see here around the perimeter of the farm, some years are worse than others as far as wildlife damage. Okay. All right. For those of you that have used the other multi-year averages analysis tool in SMS Advanced, you might find that this function might take place of what you have used for the multi-year averages in the past. This is the average yield layer. So over the years that you've got data, this is going to be your average yield. So this is kind of your long-term average for this field. And So you can kind of select this. You'll be able to start seeing the areas of the field that are reliably changing around the perimeter, and the interior height, historically is higher across that ridge. So now that we know the historical max and the averages, we can start to kind of blend in some other different ways to look at how this year compared to those other layers. Okay. So the next item that we're going to talk about is yield gap. And so this is the yield gap. This is the maximum yield minus the most current year's yield data. So my max yield, in this case, is going to be max yield minus my 2020 harvest. Okay. And in this particular case, the green is in good shape because that's that difference is small. Okay, so I had a decent yield in 2020, and it was pretty close to where it was for the max yield. Obviously, you can see some of these areas were not, and so it's kind of one of those things. If you're looking at this map and you cannot explain something, so like example, here up in the new waterway that we put in, I can explain that. I know that that's a new waterway. I know that that's why that's red. The outside of the perimeter of the field, I know that that was a bit worse on deer damage this year compared to other years. So I can explain those. If I have an area out here in the middle of the farm that I cannot explain, that's where I'm going to start drawing some questions. Do I need to soil sample that one a little more intensely? Do I need to do, more in-season scouting to see what's going on there? Did I have a planter issue? Some of those things are what should draw your attention to what, why did that not perform like it could have? Maybe half the field is in a different variety and that other variety didn't perform as well. That would be a completely other logical explanation. So those are the things that you want to, kind of detail out of why, we're helping you ask these questions of why is this map, why is there more red in this map than there should be, or that I'm comfortable with. And so that's kind of the idea that we're going with there. If you have any layer in here, any part in this map that's 0, that would mean that 2020 was your highest yielding spot for that farm. So that's kind of the other item there. And so these two little patches down here, you notice they're completely green. These were in a CRP program and they were taken out in 2020. So this is the first year, the only year that they had yield data. And so they're completely green for that reason. Okay. All right, so yield growth, and this is the one that we struggled a lot with how to present this the most consistently, and I think we've gotten there. And again, if you feel like these legend values, these numbers, need to be widened out or changed based on what you're seeing for your data, we've done the work of trying to get the colors in place that makes most sense, and we'll kind of talk about them here in a minute. But you can make these changes here to yield growth as needed. We have one legend for corn, so the kind of that middle range is between -10 and +10 bushels an acre. For all other crops, that middle range is 3 bushels an acre. And so it kind of gives you a perspective of where that middle zone is. That's, it may not be a huge deal, one way or the other. Yield growth is kind of this metric of if I looked at my most current yield and I subtracted out the average trend, so my average yield layer, this is how I'm doing. Okay. And so when we look at this map, this is telling us, are we gaining anything or are we losing anything? Okay. And so if we look at this map, the gray area, you're more or less within average. You're more or less, you're within your production norm. The orange and the red are areas where your data from 2020, so most current yield, is falling behind the average for that crop, for that area. Okay, and so the orange is a little bit behind, and the red is more, more negative. Kind of the opposite idea with the greens. The pale green is where you're slightly better than average, and then the darker green is where you're really, you know, far above what your average is, to kind of put those things into perspective. All right. So one of the things we looked at here as well is how does this relate to the overall part of the field? And so when you look at this stat, this is the metrics here behind this green box. But you can kind of see the average in this field. I'm 1.2 bushels behind my average. So 2020, I was 1.2 bushels off my trend, off my average production. Okay, so if you think about production years, and you know, county averages and state averages and those kind of things, you can almost use that as a little bit of a guide. You know, am I keeping pace with my neighbors or you know, different areas of the country? Am I at least increasing, or am I losing ground? You know, maybe I go up 1 bushel an acre, and the rest of the country has gone up 1.5 bushels an acre, you know, or something like that. It's kind of a metric to say, okay, am I going the right way, or did I just not have the weather to compete this year, you know, on a larger scale? And so that's kind of what this number is pointing out, is just, this is your overall trend. This is the average, you know, across this whole field. This is you're about 1.2 bushels off from your longer term average. Okay. All right. Normalized yield. There again, for those that have used the multi-year averages, all of the layers that were capable to be produced out of a multi-year averages layer in SMS Advanced are included here. So pretty much anything that you have built or used, you might end up, instead of using the multi-year average, you might use this going forward. And if you still want to use that, you know, the other ones are still there. There's nothing changed on any of those other tools. This one just provides a few more details that you could use other places. So this is the normalized yield mean. And basically you're looking at an average here where the middle of the map is 100 as far as an average. And then the areas that are in darker green are higher above average, and the areas in darker red are well below average for this field. Okay, so this is just kind of an average. You know, how does this, if you took out the bushels an acre out of the equation, this is a percentage. 100% is going to be average, and then, you know, above and below that is going to be above or below average. Okay. For those of you that have used coefficient of variation from the data in the multi-year averages, we've included that as well. We called it yield variability. And in my case, in this particular map, I have very little variability. You know, there's not really a good number that we can assign to say above this number, it is specifically going to be more stable, or below, you know, less stable, more variable. And so we just kind of gave this a scale, just kind of give you an idea that the red areas are, you know, fluctuate from high to low yield more often, and the green areas are tending to be you know, pretty repeatable year after year. And that could be repeatedly good or repeatedly bad. It's just telling you how, you know, what extremes they go to from one year to the next. Okay. And so once we have all of this data done for our fields, you can look at a report and show how each of your fields compare to each other. And so this first report is going to be the Agronomic Analysis. This is the efficiency one, where you showed how your seed efficiency averaged, how your nitrogen efficiency was, and you can kind of compare one field to the next. All right, and then the other report you can run with the yield analysis. This shows you the min and max yield, the average, all the gaps, all the growth, and that kind of thing. So kind of gives you an idea of, you know, from one year to the next, how do you I'm sorry, from one field to the next, how each of your fields kind of rank up. All right. So we're kind of moving right along. We're going to talk about the equipment performance report next. And again, this applies to both SMS Basic and SMS Advanced. And we looked at how detailed planners are logging data, and we're trying to see, can we make a trend out of some of that information? Can we give you some pointers on, what rows do you need to focus on more? And so that's kind of where this started at. So instead of looking at a whole swath of data, now we're looking at the individual row by row information from your equipment. And specifically, we're looking at planners. We built this in a way that it can be expanded in the future for other systems like spraying systems or something like that might log more than one value per swath. Okay, so I'm going to go a little differently with this one. I'm going to show you the end result first, and then we're going to kind of talk about the way to get there. Okay. So in our reports list, we've added a new item kind of here in the middle for the equipment performance report. So the general reports are kind of like your grower summary and your field summary report. So this is a new one that shows you per row or per nozzle type of performance. Okay, and the result, get that marker out of the way, is going to be an output that shows you all of the details for your field, for your planter in this case. So this is my corn planter. I ran this report for this spring's planting data, and I selected one hybrid. I put in a test plot, and I had an issue with one of the drive cog wheels on one of the meters. And that showed up extraordinarily well. It was a great example to use for this exact product. And so I'll kind of walk you through this. This is the hybrid that was used, but you can run this across every farm, every field, and every variety that was planted, or you can narrow it down to an individual or several fields at once if you want. But in this report, you're going to see the total area collected by each row. And so again, this was a test plot, so it's a really short pass, but you can kind of see where it's fairly low acres. You do notice on the outside, row 11 and 12, it was an arc that kind of went to the left a little bit, and so my outside rows actually planted a 1,000th more acre than the rest, and so just kind of an interesting little side thought there. But you can use this if you compared across all of your farming operation. You can see that you'll have 100 acres per row each year, or over several years. You can compile that across multiple years as well. All right. So we have average population, population percentage, doubles, skips, and average good spacing. And so my planter is a Kinsey planter. It's got a finger pickup, so it does not have a vacuum on it. I get it as tuned up as I can, and we kind of go from there. But you'll notice on row 10, this kind of sticks out. We have parameters that we can set on these values, and you can change them as you see fit. But we have parameters on these values to kind of alert you to what you want to pay attention to. Okay, and so when I had my meter that was not completely engaged, I was getting a lot of skips and doubles for part of the pass until I fixed it and then continued on. Okay, and so you'll see the individual rows and how they compare numerically, and then you'll see a chart here as well. And you can obviously see row 10 had some issues compared to the rest of them. And we also have the ability to put in where my wheel spacing is. As some of those things that kind of creep up on you, you might find that knowing where your carrying wheels are for your implement might be kind of interesting to know as you compare your planter details. And so that's what these little graphics are here. They're basically tires from the tractor and then also from the corn planter. All right. So we can kind of see that information here. This is the other chart. We got a chart for each of these attributes that we created. So population, doubles, and skips. We'll see the chart for each one. Okay. All right. So how do we get this information to show in our version of SMS? So if you haven't already, update to version 21.5. And as soon as you get updated to version 21.5, I suggest making a backup of your information. And you're going to need to delete out the data for planting out of the management tree. And what that is basically doing is we have to basically reread the planting data in order to run these reports. And so we're going to delete out the planting data that's in the tree. And then I've kind of got a screenshot here. This is going to services and reprocess files. And you find your serial number and the year and the planting information, and you add all those over to the right-hand side of the screen, and you'll process. And then it's going to put in a new attribute for you that allows us to make these reports. Okay, so that's going to be step one to getting the data to be in a way that we can run these reports. All right. Anything that you read in brand new, so if you haven't read in your 21 data yet and your 2021 data, and you upgrade to version 21.5 and then read in the data, then it will work for you automatically. You don't have to go through this step. Now, one note, not all data that's recorded in the industry is able to use this feature. This will work for anything ag leader for ILF or ag data files. It'll work for John Deere GS2, GS3s, and GS4s. And then it will also work for precision planting in their Gen 3 displays. Data from a case or from a Kinsey Blue Vantage display does not present the data in a way that we can use it for this. And so those displays we cannot work with at the moment. And unless some other things would change, I don't think we'll probably be able to get there. But for those other displays, we can read this in as is. Okay. And then to be able to get the equipment tire tracks to show up, and this is optional, you don't have to do this. You'll go into your tools menu and your management items setup, and then into your implement and your vehicle. And then on your vehicle, I'm sorry, on your implement, you'll need to go to your implement description and fill in the swath width of the planter. So in my case, it was 30 feet. And then I'll go on to the next screen and the wheel track spacing. This is a new screen altogether. You're going to enter the number of axles. So I just have one axle in line with each other. And I've got 3 tires on the left and I got 3 tires on the right. And so you're going to enter the measurement from the center line of the planter. So I've got 30 inches, I've got 60 inches, and then I got a wing tire that's out 150 inches from the center. And they're all about a 12-inch wide tire. Okay. And so you'll do that for the planter, and then you'll do kind of the same concept for your tractor. So if you have a wheel machine or a track machine, you'll select the one that applies there. For singles, kind of the same concept, and then you put in the tire width. You notice on that chart, I had a wider tire in the back of the tractor. I had 18-inch tires in the back and 14s on the front. So, but yeah, that's what you'll do to get the settings created so you can see all those details. And then when you go to run the report, you'll have 2 options. We've got one for planting and one for planting and downforce. So if your planter has automated downforce, you'll be included with those settings. If it's just got seed metering, then you'll probably use this first one. Okay. And then you'll select the management filter. So you're going to select your planter and your tractor, the year that you want, the crop type, and then either a specific field or a specific hybrid. Maybe you want to compare 2 different varieties. You can select multiple varieties and have 2 different reports to show how both stack up to each other. If one planted better, maybe one was a round, maybe one was a flat, or something like that. Okay, so that'll get you the report created. back up one step here. If you find that some of the settings that are in the report don't match your preferences, we've got them set where we think is worthy of an alert. But if you want to change those settings, you can highlight the report and go to edit, and that will allow you to change some of the settings. This is the last page of the wizard, and you can adjust what settings are in place there. This alert is the key one here. So if you want to change the alert to show 2% skips instead of 2.5% skips, that would be how you do that. Okay. So that's kind of the details on how to get there. Playing with it will probably teach you as much as I just did, but that's kind of how the details on how to get there are. So with that, I'm going to end on just a quick notice. We do have a maintenance promotion going on right now. You've known in the past that we have always, based on your expiration date, we've sent you a bill. And if you're back a few months, we send you the back maintenance as well. And we are actually gifting that back maintenance. So you'll only have to pay for a 1-year maintenance fee to get updated, even if you're several years behind. If you expired back in 2016, you can actually just call us up and we can get you updated to the most current version with just paying maintenance for that 1 year. So take advantage of that. If you have associates that that use SMS or have used SMS in the past and haven't updated for a while, that would be a great thing for them to take advantage of. All these new features come up, and all the features we've had here in the last several years would be included with that. So with that, I think I'm done. I felt like I've talked an awful lot. So I'm going to let someone else talk here. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we will answer what we can. So.
All right. Thank you very much, Aaron. And like Aaron said, if you do have any questions, go ahead and put those in chat. I do have a couple questions that have that I think are just some general questions that other people would have. So I'm going to ask you, you're going to talk a little bit longer here, Aaron. Sorry about that. First question, are these analysis functions, so the agronomic analysis and the yield analysis, are those going to be something that we're going to want to run each year?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for sure the agronomic analysis, because that one is going to look at that specific year that you've got in your system. So if you've just got done with harvest and you want to see how this year compared to last year, to get that updated information, you'll need to have that most current year every year. And for the yield analysis portion, kind of the same idea. You're kind of looking at building a trend over several years with some of those attributes. And so using the tool every year kind of gives you a way to kind of compare 1 year over another to see how you're progressing and what changes are coming in your fields. So I think in most cases, I think the answer is yes. So.
All right, thank you. Another question, can we run this over previous years and then compare it to current years to compare the data? So do we have to start with the most recent year, or can we go and set a specific year and analyze that?
Yeah, definitely. So you can start from any year that you want. So let's say you wanted to start in 2015 and go back 8 years, and then go to 2016 and go back 8 years. Every time that you do that, you kind of lay that groundwork for showing, max yield. How does max yield change over years? When you start replacing this spot in this field with the 2017 year that was better yielding than anything you've had before, how does that change your map? What does that, how does that up the goal for the next, following years? So yeah, you can run it in previous years and have it go back from that point in time, back and then compare year over year. So yes, definitely.
Great. Yeah, I can see a lot of use coming out of that. So another question, is there going to be an additional unlock that has to be purchased for these tools?
No, there is no unlock required for these tools. They are included with SMS Advanced, and the equipment report is included for basic or advanced. So no, this one is just tools that you've actually been able to create these layers in years past. It's a lot of cumbersome ways of getting there and getting the layers to align just right. And so by us making these tools, we didn't really reinvent anything. We just made it much simpler to get. And so there's no added fees for these new tools.
All right. We did have a question that came in from Jason. How does it recognize the probably the fertilizing prescription or fertilizing as the applied nitrogen layer in the agronomic analysis?
Sure. So it looks at the content of the rate applied data. So if you look at an as applied layer, or if you look at a prescription layer, when you save it to your tree, save it as NH3 or save it as UAN 32%, and then when we focus on as applied data or we focus on the nitrogen data, the prescription data, we'll look at the product that was used and the component, the rate applied, and how much of that component was nitrogen and how much of that was filler. So we look at the product that was applied with in the prescription or in the as applied and the rate applied.
All right. Have another question that came in from Bill. How does it work on the agronomic analysis with multiple applications of a product? If we are, for example, applying a nitrogen pre-plant and then with the planter, a side dress application.
Yeah. So that's a great question. So we pull any layer within that time span. So I mentioned 400 days back from harvest. So yeah, if you had applied, I'll use nitrogen because that's more common, but it would also work for anything else. But yeah, if you applied, let's say a DAP or a MAP phosphorus, there's a portion of those two both that have nitrogen in them. We will go back and find each layer that had any component of nitrogen in it, and then we'll sum up everything we found. So if you applied 100 pounds of MAP, you're going to get 11 pounds of nitrogen in that pass, and then we're going to add that to, let's say you put on anhydrous, 150 pounds of anhydrous, so we're going to add 150 to 11, so we got 161. And then if you came back and did another 20 gallons an acre of side dress, we'll add all those together and we'll come up with a total. So we try to look at it from all angles to say, okay, there's going to be every different combination under the sun, especially for nitrogen, but it applies for other fertilizers as well. But nitrogen is no two people do it the same. So we tried making it as flexible as possible to find every layer that had the information that you would want. So.
All right. Yeah, it sounds like the setup in management of that is going to be really important.
Yep.
So another question from Max on the equipment performance report. So what is the minimal amount of info that you're going to need on the planter to generate the performance report? Do we need it? Like we do need swath width, row spacing, offsets, but what else might we need as the minimum?
Yeah, so basically if you're doing anything with, if the display is recording your planting information, so if you have seed command on the display, on the planter tractor, or if you're using the display as your planter monitor, for those displays that I mentioned, that's really the starter package. That's all you really need. The other items like downforce or speed tube or things like that, those are, or sure speed, those are the things that that would be added as well if you choose to, you can report in that capacity. But really the starter packages, you just need to be able to use that monitor as your seed monitor. So.
All right. Another question here. would we be able, so with the agronomic analysis and the yield analysis, those create mapping layers, would we be able to export those out to Agfinity?
Yeah. So definitely you can, when you've processed them in SMS, you can then upload them to your Agfinity account. And then you could have them with you wherever you go. So if you're out there scouting, in the next growing season, and you're kind of looking to see if any of those areas that were concerning, I was mentioning that on that yield gap, if you can't explain something, why can't you explain it? Go out and find out what's going on. So if you look at that yield gap layer and you go to the areas that had those lower values, you can take that with Agfinity Mobile or just the Agfinity browser and be able to see, in that area of the field, is there something else going on mid-season, or is there insect pressure, something like that that you need to be aware of. So yes, you can export it up to Agfinity. Yep.
All right, perfect. So would it be advisable to target soil testing from these results? So you mentioned, you were pointing out, like, it really shows where we might, or with these analysis, it shows where we might have those problem areas. Would we be able to do target soil testing with that?
I certainly think so. I mean, you could do soil testing or you could do tissue testing in following years. But it gives you a way to kind of, add more information in these areas that you can't explain, what else is going on that I'm not picking up from, just general scouting or from next year's crop. So yeah, I definitely think soil sampling or tissue sampling would be advisable. If you can't see something, you can't manage what you can't measure. So finding out some of those things is definitely helpful. So.
All right. So in the yield analysis, if we plant the same variety in the field over multiple years, would we see a different highest yield product maps to indicate this?
Yeah, if you use the same variety, so I think one of the numbers I had was 5440. In the display, it's the same number, the same product number. So if I planted that on the same field in different years, the resulting highest product map would be both show that variety. But when I go to the different calendar years or the different years of highest yield, then I would show the difference, which area was better in different years. So if you use the same display name, it's not going to show a difference, but if it will show a difference on the year. So.
All right. I don't see any other questions coming in here, and we're almost have our hour up. So again, thank you, Aaron, for walking us through these new tools and features. And thank you everyone for joining us. Just kind of a PSA here. We do have training classes coming up this winter, some virtual and classroom training. So those are available to register for right now. So if you would like to take a look, you can go ahead and register for SMS basic and advanced classes. And then also take a look at our YouTube channel. We will be uploading this recording to that channel if you want to. So that's the Ag Leader SMS tutorials channel. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that. So again, thank you all for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Bye, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.